Thank you, Major Rosado, for your insightful remarks. We'll now move on to our first panel discussion, titled Lessons Learned During 20 Years of the Republic and the U.S. Role in Afghanistan. I would like to invite the panelists to the stage, Mr. David Lloyd, Mr. Bill Borgio, Mr. Jawi Hamdan. I would now like to hand over to our panel moderator, Governor Qayyum Rahimi, with whom I have the honor of accompanying on the front line in Iran province to lead the discussion. Governor Rahimi is a distinguished scholar, politician, and soldier who currently serves as the head of the political office for Afghanistan United Front. He has held key positions in the Republic and Independent Directorate of Local Governments and served as a governor of both Iran and Logar province. Governor Rahimi is well versed in the matter of religious extremism, and when needed, he didn't hesitate to put on a uniform, take up arms, and lead from the front lines, even while serving as a governor. His hand on a courageous leadership has earned him great respect in Afghan leadership circle. Governor Rahimi, over to you, sir.
Welcome everyone. Our panelist, David Lloyd, is an accomplished journalist and author with 43 decades of experience covering Afghanistan and South Asia. As a former BBC correspondent and strategic communication advisor to the Afghan United Front, David has a deep understanding of the region complexities. He has written extensively about foreign involvement in Afghanistan, providing a historical perspective that is invaluable for understanding the long-term impacts of the U.S. presence in the country. But I think it is not possible to cover David in one paragraph. My brother, Jawi Hamdan, was recognized as a recognized figure in Afghan political and professional spheres, having worked with various national and international organizations in senior technical and advisory roles. His experience includes serving twice as an advisor to the office of the Afghan president, as well as working with the Afghan Ministry of Finance, the United Nations, USAID, and more. Jawi has successfully led in steered various projects and is a regular commentator on Afghanistan socio-political issues. And VOA, he had issues and frequently featured in major media outlets like Guardian, BBC, CNN, VOA. He holds a bachelor's degree in information technology and 2 master's degrees in business administration and leadership. Well, he's a lawyer, political. Thank you. Bill Borgio, Senior Fellow at Foundation for Defense of Democracy. Unfortunately, we lost it in Afghanistan. So you have to help us. And the editor of embedded generals with U.S. and Canadian forces in Iraq and Afghanistan, combined with his military background, offers a unique perspective on such failure of U.S. military strategies in the region. Ben's work is widely published and respected in both academic and policy-making circles. He's a veteran and is well known on terrorism. Well, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming, everyone. Dear Madina, خوش آمدید. For 21 years, we, coalition forces, together with Afghans, we fought, we defended Afghanistan, we freed Afghanistan together, we rebuilt Afghanistan, and it was a time where millions of girls were going to school, and we had a democracy, we had a parliament, we had senate, we had army, we had like everything. Unfortunately, we lost the war, but the good thing is that we didn't lose people of Afghanistan. And on the positive side, what international community did, how international community helped us to rebuild Afghanistan, it was enormous. There were enormous achievements. So I call that generation Republic, who you see here, some of them. Those people are the people who will retake Afghanistan back and rebuild it in a better way this time. We'll come to the first question. My first question is to David. For the intervention that, for 21-year intervention of the international community in Afghanistan, what do you think, what did we learn? Or maybe did we learn or we didn't learn?
When you say we, it's quite an interesting question. I think the United States came into Afghanistan in 2001 without any kind of military doctrine for this kind of intervention, and without any understanding of the context of the country, and with a little imagination as to try to get to the context of the country. And with many honourable exceptions, some of them are in this room, America never really learned to change those ways. We could go on all afternoon about the lessons that should have been learned. It's been quite interesting to watch in the military the language changing over the last 20 years. Even the US Army doesn't talk about lessons learned anymore. They changed it to lessons identified, which is obviously something different. And in fact, the internal reports interviewing the whole series of people who were involved in Afghanistan and Iraq was called Lessons Encountered. Again, not lessons learned, but lessons that we might have come across somewhere along the way. And I think I've written a whole book about the America's engagement over the last 20 years, so I don't want to go on all afternoon. But I think there was, from the very beginning, a significant mistake made in not putting enough boots on the ground at the start. President Bush and Secretary Rumsfeld in particular have this mythical idea of a light footprint, that somehow you could take down a government and not put security in its place. Instead of that, what they did was to stand up the old militia leaders from the 1990s. Some of them were good, but many of them were not so good and were quite corrupt. And at the same time, without security, a huge amount of money began to pour into the country. So, of course, the people who captured a lot of those resources were those very individuals who I described. So there was a sense in which the Afghan Republic, and I like the phrase of Generation Republic, and you're in this room, it's for you to take this country back. From the very beginning in 2001, the job was made much harder by the fact that some of the wrong people had been supported. And throughout the emerging republic, and I saw this when I was working for a year advising President Ghani's office, it became really difficult to bringing the institutions of democracy because of the support that these people had from the very beginning. And I think that one lesson that has been internalized, certainly by the Biden administration, was the wrong lesson to learn from Afghanistan, which is that military intervention, it should not happen in Afghanistan. And I'm afraid to say the UK government, as well as the US government, have now taken this very strong view that there shouldn't be any military intervention in Afghanistan. And I don't think anyone in this room is asking for military intervention from the US again. No one expects it to happen. But there should certainly be more opportunity for people who do want to take their country back, by political means if possible, by military means if necessary, and certainly at least getting out of their way. So I think the wrong lessons were learned from the beginning and the wrong lessons were learned at the end in terms of saying, let's not get involved in any kind of military intervention in a country which, as we know, has become a crucible for international terrorism.
Thank you. The next question is to Bill. When 9/11 happened and the terrorist attack in America was like a second Pearl Harbor, and those who attacked America, all of them were not Afghans, but they were supported and harbored by Taliban, which are ruling Afghanistan right now, or maybe we surrendered Afghanistan to them. We went here, we Afghans plus the Americans, the NATO, we went here and we had an objective to eliminate terrorism and Al-Qaeda. As an American, do you think we reached that goal?
We absolutely have not reached that goal. Al-Qaeda is, I hesitate to use the term reestablished itself because it was always there. Even as the U.S. was present in Afghanistan, it was raiding Al-Qaeda training camps. I go back to between 2010 and 2015, the CIA's official estimate of Al-Qaeda's strength in Afghanistan was 50 to 100. It stayed the same, even though they were reporting killing anywhere from 25 to 75. And that was just what we saw yearly. So there was this live, steady state of Al-Qaeda. Then we raided U.S. and Afghan forces raided two Al-Qaeda training camps, one which John said was the largest training camp he's seen since 9/11. Not in Afghanistan, but seen anywhere in the world. This was in Sherlock and Kandahar in October 2011. How did we get the intelligence on that? According to the reporting from a raid in, I believe it was Paktia province, on another Al-Qaeda camp. So the U.S. officials have a long history of saying Al-Qaeda is dead, Al-Qaeda is decimated, defeated, degraded. The whole slew of D-words out there that describe what Al-Qaeda is. But the fact is, that whole time, Al-Qaeda was present in Afghanistan, working side by side with the Taliban to help restore its perverse Islamic emirate of Afghanistan. And the reason why did Al-Qaeda have to be decimated, defeated, degraded, done, all of those things, it started with the Obama administration and was continued by the Trump administration. Remember, Secretary Pompeo said that the Taliban would help us destroy Al-Qaeda, and another key word. They all needed to leave Afghanistan, and the U.S. couldn't leave Afghanistan without Al-Qaeda having a significant presence there. So this was the big lie that we were told by political figures and with collusion of our intelligence services at times. So what do we have today? Based on the UN reporting from the United Nations Political Support and Sanctions Monitoring Zone, they're saying that Al-Qaeda is training camps in 12 of the 34 provinces. So that's at least 12 training camps that are active in Afghanistan. I also have seen reporting of at least 4 camps in Gaza province alone. Sounds right. Al-Qaeda has a significant presence there throughout the entire world. And those provinces don't include places like actually elected them hosts, all the countries would host training camps for Al-Qaeda. So, my estimation, Al-Qaeda is in a far stronger position in Afghanistan today than it was pre-9/11. The Taliban controls the country. It's a literal state sponsor of terrorism. It is providing, it's giving Al-Qaeda support. The UN reports have been very clear about this, including passports and national ID cards for members of Al-Qaeda and their families. There's safe houses in multiple provinces, weapons storage depot, media operations centers. If that sounds like a defeated Al-Qaeda, I'd hate to see what Al-Qaeda looks like if it was victorious. So this is a major problem. The problem that exists here in the United States is the Biden administration can't admit that that exists. It denies that that Al-Qaeda's presence in Afghanistan is so strong because politically that's a problem. The optics of Al-Qaeda, I hate the word reestablish itself, let's just say invigorated itself in Afghanistan, would mean that the withdrawal from Afghanistan was an abject failure. I will admit that. The Trump administration has financed that too because of the Doha. Now, it didn't follow through on it. But look, the United States can't even admit here that we lost the wars in Afghanistan, let alone admit that Al-Qaeda has a significant presence there. Until we come to these hard realizations, these problems will only fester.
Thank you, Bill. And that's it. Like, for 21 years, international community helped us billions of dollars and billions of dollars. And we live in Afghanistan, there was a population, there was army, there was lots of things. We lost the war. Sometimes we blame Pakistan, sometimes we blame Russia, sometimes we blame America, NATO. What was our responsibility? What mistakes we Afghans, from your perspective as an Afghan, what mistakes we made?
Thank you very much. I think I'm loud enough without the mic, so I'll go without the mic. Can you hear me all? Yeah. Oh, for the camera, okay. Sure. First of all, thank you so much to the Afghanistan United Fund for putting this together. Facility. Is it better? For facilitating this gathering today and the reminder of this dark day, the 15th of August, which happened 3 years ago. And this is a stark reminder, a tragic reminder of what we had, what we lost, and what we took for granted, and what we need to get back. So thank you for facilitating that, because sometimes I think we get a little too comfortable with what we have lost and what's happening in Afghanistan. We might be, better off relatively, some of us, being away from Afghanistan, and that they all about relatives, families, friends, colleagues, in millions or back home, who are suffering under a tyrannic, repressive, and cruel regime. So thank you for my. Governor Rainey, as far as your question is concerned, I think we have to follow. We have to follow. Whenever you turn one finger towards somebody else, you're actually four of them are pointing back to you. So I think this is about time that we should accept and take responsibility for what happened. That is our first. That is our first and foremost Afghans. I can sit around. I can sit around all day for the whole day. Blame America. America, the West, Pakistan, or others. But first of all, it was our failure. We weren't committed enough. We weren't strong enough. We weren't dedicated enough. And as much as I hate it, we weren't patriotic enough to defend our honest, I could have done better. Me sitting here today, I know I could have done better. All of us could have done better. So the second biggest system I sit here 2 years after collapse, after 20 years, being part of the system, as an Afghan who returned in 2002, with millions of dreams, ambitions, passion. Should have seen it being built brick by brick every day. And we did do a relatively good job of building a country from scratch. But then we lost it. So the first and foremost I'd like to share is before we make any alliances outside of honesty, we should unite inside the country. We should make alliances inside of us. If we haven't learned this before, because of not having access to information, what is really happening throughout our very turbulent history, we should have learned it this time. I've read a quote, very popular quote somewhere, that if the ship is sinking and you have a sinking ship, the mice are not going to be saved. So we have lost the ship. None of us are safe. From our political, elite, to our educated professionals, to our women, to our kids, to our even religious leaders. We have lost it. We are all in loss. So as far as $3 trillion, which is a cliche figure that has become a cliche in the past 20 years, I want to tell you very responsibly that a very tiny fraction of those $3 trillion actually were given to Afghans and were controlled or oversaw by Afghans. The absolute majority of that $3 trillion were spent by the donor countries themselves, actual and as they pleased. And then, there were, I'll give you one example that we were doing. There was a project that I was overseeing. I was part of the program. This was, I won't name the entities or the individuals, but this project was responsible to pay the salaries of the Afghan police at the Ministry of Interior. This was a United Nations organ or a unit that was managing these salaries for the Afghan police for almost 20 years. They charged 8% of the entire amount that they were dispersing just as an administrative fees. And then there were, salaries paid in, I know according to American or Western standards, it might not be a lot, but according to Afghan standards, like paying somebody $50,000 in salaries, that's a lot. And what they did, this was supposed to be an automated system to fight ghost soldiers and police count and transparency in their salaries and ranks and files and everything. But what happened? I came across this by investigating the project. What they did, they would actually go, our international friends, based on many reasons, an experience that they would explain, being at an AUF situation, not prepared for the cultural and many other aspects of the country. They would literally go pay HR and finance managers at provinces to send them rosters, like taking pictures on their phone cameras. And then they would bring these pictures and enter the data into a Microsoft Access database and print them as computerized. And the national community, led by the United Kingdom, unfortunately, because the police were funded by the United Kingdom and a coalition of other countries, including Germany, Japan, and other countries. They would consider it, automated data, and they would report based on it that we have apparently 150-something thousand police. When we came on board and we actually did digitized roster and, took the biometrics and all the other 9 yards, we realized that we have around 15 to 20% growth rate. People who had left Afghanistan years before, they were still being paid. And this system was made such that Afghans would have very little say in it, unfortunately. But I'm not saying that we are not to be blamed. It wasn't our fault. We made a lot of mistakes in the past 20 years. Also because we were new to all of this. We were building a nation from the ground up, from the scratch. Our challenges were several-fold. We had to educate the generation to come build a country. We had to send General Sami to military school. We had to send all our other military officers to school, only then to come and serve in the Afghan military, in the Afghan police. I had to go to university after I left office. I studied at the American University of Afghanistan. I was studying while I was working. And right after, or even when we're studying, building a bureaucracy, building a government, interacting with the international community, my first job was with an organization called Afghan Authority for International Assistance. President Lani was the head of this entity back in the day. We couldn't even accommodate and move the money, the billions of dollars that we received. We didn't even have a wall for it. We didn't even have banks. I remember very clearly, at the presidential palace, we literally built a steel vault so we could keep the money with millions of dollars in it. And a couple of guys had the keys to it until we built the banks. So 20 years in our lives might be a long time, but in the life of a nation, it's not long. We had to learn. And then, unfortunately, the disbursement of aid and money and funds and everything, it was so conditional that you couldn't do much. The Afghan government, the Afghans would help you. And then, our own bureaucracy, our system. One of the funny things that I keep reminding my friends most of the time, the Afghan fiscal year is only 3 months. It's 9 months. We have the 9 months fiscal year. The first 3 months is just processing the budget or planning for projects. Last 3 months is closing down the project, so you only have 3 months. That's why most of Afghan government entities and ministries could not even spend their developmental budget. And at the end of the fiscal year, everybody would be like, let's just buy more tops, more furniture, and more everything. So there were a lot of lessons to learn. And we hoped we had more time. We thought we had more time. We thought our international partners, especially the United States of America, with the ideals that they came with and educated us on and told us that they would be a partner in good and bad, we thought we had more time.
Quick one. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I want to tie with both the same panelists here said about not or mistakes made by the Afghans as well as our failures, that Americans were less than supporting the warlords at the beginning. We over-relied on them, and then by the very end, where were they when Afghanistan was at its greatest crisis? They melted away. They couldn't muster up their forces to mount a final defense. Didn't understand it at the beginning, and we didn't understand it at the end. And to me, those individuals can't be relied on in the future. It has to be people like Sammy and everyone in this room. That's all.
David, from the international community point of view, from England, what do you think? Why we Afghans lost the war and what were our mistakes?
Not representing the international community as it were on this panel, but I mean, we saw, and my friend Shali Hamdar has described in graphic detail some of the problems from inside the administration. But I think I think, from what I saw as a reporter at the time, it did just go back to the beginning, the corruption, and I agree to an extent with Hamid Karzai on this, who was very strong on saying Afghanistan is not a corrupt country. The corruption came into the country because of the money and the way and these descriptions of money that you couldn't spend, this safes of cash because you didn't have, that doesn't feel very secure with managing international funds. So I think there were structural problems, inside the country, but there was this from the very beginning, this sense that the money should come in, should be spent, and there was also, and the way I put it in my book was, it was like driving a car with the brake on. Pressing the drive and pressing the brake at the same time. The Bush administration was schizophrenic, and this America never really recovered from this. It was desired to have a very light footprint, get in and out, and at the same time, from about 2002, this sort of sense of America builds a shining city on a hill wherever it goes, spreading democracy, and perhaps there could be something here. But we're not doing nation building. So there was this, we're not doing nation building, but at the same time, we're putting all these billions of dollars in, millions and billions from the very beginning. And I think that problem was, the cliche inside the administration, in 2010 wasn't the 9th year of the war. It was it was year one for the 9th time. Every group of soldiers, every group of aid officials who came in had their own ideas. So I think there was a lack of strategic patience, a lack of sense of, the development officials that I spoke to in 2001-2 were saying this is going to take 30 years. And the soldiers were being told, we'll be out of here by Christmas next year. And the gap between those two was never quite completely sort of solved.
Thank you, Bill. One of the reasons that America pulled out from Afghanistan was the cost of war. It's very costly war and a very long war. So they pulled out, and they pulled out badly. All of us know how it was pulled out. Do you think that America and America's interest in the region are safe now, and the cost of war, of the Ukrainian war, what's going in Yemen, what's going with Israel, did the cost of war reduce?
To say the withdrawal went badly, I think is the greatest understatement. It was an absolute disaster, and that's indeed the real cost that the U.S. has incurred. Its position within the international community. I have no doubts that Russia, in part, was spurred on to invade Ukraine because of weakness, U.S. weakness with its allies. As far as regionally, as I explained, we didn't even touch on the Islamic State, but you have attacks now being directed against the West. When we were in Afghanistan, we at least had the ability to target, along with our Afghan partner, to go after the Islamic State safe havens, which were more interested in going after targets in the West, as Al-Qaeda was more onto the Taliban state building project, both dangerous in the long term. Now both are happening. I don't see how that's in the interest. The cost to the U.S. towards the end of the war, given a small presence, was nowhere near as large as it was when, for instance, during the surge, we had over 100,000 troops in the country. It's certainly not a zero-sum game, and I think that the sum has gone against the United States. Abandoning an ally that was one that we promised to protect. I can't explain the damage that's caused. It's immediately after the withdrawal, Russians and Chinese are going to American allies. And there were articles written about this in Wall Street Journal and elsewhere, and whispering in your ear saying, can you depend, if it's your ally, can you depend on them? I mean, how did the Taiwanese thinking about Afghanistan? Look at how the U.S. operated with respect to Israel. So, you know, to me, those were the real costs. Aside from within Afghanistan, the terrorism issue and supporting its allies, the costs internationally are just enormous. And I don't see how the United States recovers from this. It did recover from a similar problem after the Vietnam War, but the U.S. is far more polarized, and the U.S. Public is really has become isolationist at this stage, which gives me concern about getting support for your efforts to retake your country.
Just very good, and I agree with all of that, but there's also the moral damage to US forces.
Absolutely.
And people in this room are working on this. To pull out, to lose a war in the way that it was lost, and to pull out of the way that it was pulled out, and not just US forces, but your allies as well. I mean, the sense within those forces of being betrayed by their own politicians is so deeply damaging. And during the summer, that terrible August, 3 years ago, listening to radio phoning programs in the UK, there were brave Royal Marines weeping about what had happened in Afghanistan and the losses that they and their comrades had sustained. And I think the politicians don't quite realise the damage that that's done.
Problems that's created hurting here in the United States. Yeah, excellent point.
Thank you. That's what do you think? What were the many reasons if you count them? I think lots of them because the time is short, so we can go to all of them. The main reasons of the collapse, and what was the neighboring countries, like especially Iran and Pakistan, role in what happened? Did they help with the collapse or not?
Well, first of all, I want to make a personal correction for myself. We haven't lost the war because there wasn't a war in the first place. We had skirmishes, we had guerrilla warfare. There never was an actual war, and especially the brave Afghan soldiers. They never lost the war. We lost politics. And that the first reason for the collapse of Afghanistan was when the political, dynamics changed. Especially, as much as we are grateful, Afghans, all of us, to the assistance from our international, friends and allies, especially the United States. They paid, both in the blood and sacrifices and finances and other resources. But when President Obama put us on a timeline, that is really when the decline of the republic started. And President Biden, thanks to him, put the final nail in the coffin. That is really when we lost. We had lost the war the moment we were put on a glass hour timeline. We were like, you have this much time to fix your country, and we're getting it. So, popular saying by the Taliban, if we had all the watches in the world, they had the time. They just had to wait us out. They just had to wait when would the U.S. pull out, and they would take over. And I'm amazed. It was basically giving them a blueprint, a strategic blueprint of this is how you're going to take over the country. So we spent basically 20 years of war, $3 trillion, 3 presidents, and thousands of American lives, tens of thousands of Afghan lives, to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. I mean, seriously. That's what we did. We replaced the Taliban. And look at just yesterday. The U.S. flag was under the feet of these terrorist elements. Is U.S. safer? You think it's just about time? I'm amazed how U.S. politicians, especially this current administration, does not realize it. As Albert Einstein once said, if you repeat the same experiment and expect a different result, that's the clinical definition of insanity. Didn't we do the same thing after the Afghan jihad? What happened? And now, the second time, 9/11. What are we waiting for the third time? So there are four major reasons of collapse, I think, categorically. And this was confirmed by the U.S. institution CIGAR confirmed it. The first and foremost was the political legitimization of the Taliban through the Doha process, the disastrous Doha process. So much for we're not negotiating with the terrorists. We will just reclassify a terrorist group to something else and then we'll negotiate with them. That doesn't change it. The second one, which should be an historic lesson for us Afghans, we heavily depended and relied on foreign powers. The United States, the UK, on our other international allies, we overstretched ourselves. We literally, basically presented a prescription for failure. We had a military at the size and capacity that we couldn't support. We had institutions, we had projects, we had bureaucracy that we couldn't support. We should have stretched us as we went along, and we should have minimized our reliance on international partners as generous as they were. We should have realized, our politicians should have realized, our leaders, that this party is going to end one day. So that. Number three, I think the most important thing is the political dissemination, the political chaos in Afghanistan. That really disappointed a lot of Afghans. And our politicians, and I use this in the general terms, they betrayed us. We can sit here and tell America what they did wrong, and they did. They made mistakes. But it was our politicians who sold us out. It was our politicians who told us that they were stand up for us. They took, like my friend here mentioned, all these warlords who were basically getting paid billions of dollars, the best, positions and incentives throughout the 20 years of the government, from contracts to, military equipment to everything, so they can stand up on the 15th of August, which they did. They looted the country, literally. They ripped us off because of this day. They said, when it comes, we will stand up. We have militaries, we have armies, we have experience, we have this, we have support of our supporters, and they did. And the last but not least, the government was not as effective for the common Afghan in the provinces, in the districts, as we should have been. Most of our political elite, we were busy, having fun, having these fancy meetings and conferences. We forgot about the common Afghan. And this was the perfect breeding ground for, support and recruitment for the insurgents. If someone could come and join the Afghan military or police or others, if someone had the opportunity to take the minimum advantage of government services of all these billions of dollars of resources, it would have been a different story. But we turned out, I think the gap between the city and the village became so great that this gap was filled by the insurgents, by the terrorists. So those four reasons alone, I think, were the biggest reasons and the main reason for the collapse.
Thank you. I have one more thing, then if you give me permission. The last question, and then we will go to QA. David, we did a partnership, we did two partnerships with RACE. One was fighting against USA-Afghanistan invasion. The second was fighting terrorism war. I mean, both times, sometimes we Afghans feel we were betrayed. We were left alone, we were thrown under the bus. What do you think? How it went? And what should we Afghans have learned from the two experiences?
Well, I think the worst years of Afghanistan's recent history until since 2021 were 92 to 96. And I spent some time in Kabul when we used to sleep in the BBC house in the basement because There were so many rockets coming at night, you didn't know where they were coming from, you didn't know if the house was going to be hit. So we're thinking basically with a shovel and these kind of earthquake shocks. And so I think anyone who's in Kabul at that time will say, yeah, that was sort of the worst time in their life. And that happened because there's a wonderful book and film, Charlie Wilson's War, which tells how the CIA funded the Mujahideen in the way that they did. And that money, the siphon of money didn't stop after the Russians left in 1989. It carried on. It carried on, it funded these Mujahideen fighters who ended up fighting among themselves after 92. And I think that was the betrayal of Afghanistan, frankly, by its own people. But the international community took their eyes off Afghanistan. And I think the lesson learned from that, in the mid-90s, Afghanistan was the so-called forgotten war. I wasn't going to spend a huge amount of time there because I couldn't get it on the 9 o'clock news. And I'm not really willing to risk my life, not for intelligence journalism. And so, we were, and I was then based in the region, I was based in India, and so I think there was an opportunity for me to go. But there was no interest. This was the forgotten war. And then after the Taliban emerged, things changed and began to get interesting in television news studies, but of course terrible for the people of Afghanistan after 96. And I think the lesson that the international community needs to learn from that is that if you forget about Afghanistan, then it's going to come back and bite you. And so I think that, and I think that is beginning to happen, the forgetfulness period, for reasons that we know about the Biden administration can't be frank about the catastrophe of the withdrawal, and pretends that there's this functioning counter-terrorism relationship with the Taliban, which is a fantasy, but is a fantasy that is a very strong piece of foreign policy by the government of this country. And the willingness of the current administration to forget that Afghanistan exists and their desire is, I think, a real failure of imagination. It's a state failure for the United States. And as Bill has written frequently in the Long War Journal, it's not a question of if, but when I'll try to succeed in carrying out attacks from Afghanistan.
Thank you very much. Thank you, David. Thank you, thank you, David. Now, as we are going to take questions, I think there's a mic. Yes, there is a mic. We should be safe.
I thank the young officer to made them the opportunity. I have two quick questions. One of the panel talk about democracy in Afghanistan. Nobody think a United States or Afghan leader who was running that 21 years for democracy in Afghanistan. They didn't study about democracy. Democracy wasn't a t-shirt you just give to every Afghan baby. There's democracy in Afghanistan, which started traditional democracy in 1964 after Constitution. That democracy was based on power of local, provincial power. King made that. That collapsed in 1973. Then this prescription wasn't ready. All element, democracy has elements. You know that. There are three types of democracy, which is one of, they started in Afghanistan, the presentation democracy. That needs a lot of elements. The society was completely distracted. Society was partitioned. How you can make it a democratic country is not a t-shirt. That one panel can tell us how United States or Afghan leaders, why they started democracy. That's one of my questions. The second question about the tourism. Tourism didn't have roots prior to those 1978 or 1973. Prior to 1973, tourism doesn't have roots in Afghanistan. How these tourists came to Afghanistan, what that 21 years, how element the tourism from Afghanistan is it's possible to tourism not grow in Afghanistan in presence of the Taliban. I want to explanation. My main part here, colleague talked very nicely, but doesn't come to the main part of the problem of Afghanistan. I used to be a professor of university. That was the reason I want to take the Thank you.
Very distinguished question for stuff. Let me try and answer the democracy question and perhaps leave the terrorism question to my fellow panelists. If I could quote the former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, democracy is a terrible system of government, but it's better than all the others. There are so many problems with introducing a democratic system. I think one of the challenges, well, there were two challenges in Afghanistan. One, the historical unwillingness to, for a whole variety of reasons, which I don't need to go into here, to accept that there should be political parties. And the lack of political parties and political groups in Afghanistan that were not allied with warlords and not allied with tribal traditions was a real challenge. And because of the single list system of voting, which is not used in any democratic legislature in the world, but was imposed by the United States after 2001 in Afghanistan. If you read the constitutional literature on that, it tends to militate against the creation of political parties. It's a system that is linked towards Afghanistan not having functioning political parties. So I think that's one problem that you always tend to end up with these big figures, Ghani, Karzai, etc., who needed to pay people, frankly, in order to get the regional support that they got. The other problem was that you never had a democracy in the Jeffersonian sense because you never had taxation. And, this country was founded on no taxation without representation. In Afghanistan, you had the opposite. You had representation without taxation. And it meant that the people in parliament weren't accountable to the people who elected them for any of the taxes that were being raised, because there weren't any taxes. They were, because the money that was coming into the country was coming from my taxes and the taxes of the Americans in this room. It wasn't coming from Afghanistan itself in terms of taxation, which was a very low level, even by the end of the Afghan Republic. So you have this problem that the people who were the members of parliament, the members of the Royal Journal, were not accountable to the people who had elected them, and it meant that they were, became inevitably corrupt characters because there wasn't any reason not to be, frankly, given the amount of money that was swashing around in the country. I know that begins to answer, but I mean, Professor, we can discuss this over here.
The question was tourism in Afghanistan with the Taliban. Did I get that right?
Well, how did terrorism get embedded?
Yeah, the roots of terrorism.
Roots of terrorism.
Oh, within Afghanistan. Yes. Well, yeah. Wait, that's a long answer there. I mean, it starts with really with the war with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Pakistan, its support for the more violent jihadist organizations. That was, the real root of this. And Pakistan saw the opportunity to, I have to, we talk about this, the reasons why, why we lost Afghanistan, Pakistan. I have to add Pakistan in that list as well as Iran, as well for supporting the Taliban. These countries saw an opportunity to extend their influence. In the case of Pakistan, they saw strategic depth in Afghanistan. They saw the ability to leverage Afghanistan as a counterweight to India, and they supported, some of it was cynical or, some weren't within the ISI were true believers, but some weren't. Some were on the team of Bin Laden, Mullah Omar, and stuff. And that's the roots. And with Mullah Omar gaining success and consolidating control of most of Afghanistan in the 90s, he welcomes Al Qaeda and fellow travelers, and really that's the roots of the relationship. And it's a relationship that's been forged in blood over the course of 4 decades now. And those ties are strong. There's intermarriage with Arabs and Pakistanis and Afghans. And these are, it hasn't gotten any better. I mean, people that say, well, the Taliban are moderate, the Taliban break ties with Al Qaeda because now they have a country and they don't need Al Qaeda. It's not a matter of need. There's an issue of want there. They agree. They're fellow travelers. That's what makes them dangerous to Afghanistan, to Afghanistan's neighbors, and to the global community.
Yeah, I'll also try to take a crack at both of those questions. First, sir, I think mostly when we talk about these issues, we do not give enough credit to the Afghan people for being democratic, for supporting a Republican people's government. 8 million of your people, us, Afghans, we came out and voted for a democratic regime. That is unprecedented throughout our history. Even in the US, you don't get that. If you count the eligible number of voters back in 2004, that is the absolute, this was an overwhelming number. 11 million of our kids were going to schools, 44% girls. We had women ministers back in the 1960s. Foreigners could go to any village in Afghanistan and be welcomed with the warmest Afghan hospitality. We had factories, we had women going to the street and dressed as they please. Democracy is not hated by Afghans. It's an evolutionary principle. You don't have anything else. 159 countries are republics, democratic governments. So it's not like it was invented by Americans or the British. It's a human evolutionary process. And Afghans, welcomed it. We adapted it. Only until we were betrayed by the politicians. Only when they found the cracks, how to defeat it. And it was not the Afghan people who did not accept democracy or didn't go along with it. It was the warlords, it was the criminals, it was the terrorists. And unfortunately, some of those elements were supported by our very allies. And the second question, where did the terrorism come from? I think we've all read those few books about the contemporary history. Back in the day, they were not called terrorists, they were called freedom fighters. And they were means for politics. And then later they turned rogue and they became terrorists. I mean, we have seen the definitions, skewed. Right now, the terrorists are apparently, not terrorists anymore, until they are terrorists again. But I think one of the most important things we forget in Afghanistan is the politics of geography. We are stuck in a geography which is, bound for conflict. From Alexander the Great to the Taliban. It is where Alexander Burns came to spy on those Mohammed's government to see if he was good enough not to let the Tsarist Russia to come and invade and build a firewall. Then for the Pakistan and the US and the West to build a firewall against the Soviets. And then for others, and now it is apparently what they call as scorching ground. So the Afghan politics right now is not just limited to Afghanistan. It is the scorching ground for Russia, for China, for India, and their powers and everything. So we are also, cursed by the politics of geography until we change that reality and turn this geography into a blessing. So.
Well, on the account of from where the terrorism comes, I would say if Donald Trump didn't do a coup on Verifone, if the communists didn't do a coup on Donald Trump, if the Mujahideen leaders didn't run and surrender to ISI, they wouldn't be terrorism. So I think international community have a role in that, and we Afghans also have a role in that. We have the capacity to be used by others, and we have to lead that. I will take one more question, and then we will finish the session.
let me more focused and realistic, because it's a political discussion for most of the world. And we are just like ordinary people, you should get focused more. My question is, where was the sophisticated hacker that was not found and figured out in 20 years and finally ended with a failure? And the second question of mine is, if we go back to the reverse order in 2001, which action should be taken that we should troubleshoot or debug or fail the hacker and we will not fail in the next future? That's the question, please.
Great.
Where was the hiccup?
What were that?
The sophisticated hiccup, the bottleneck.
Where is it?
Where was the jam for the trouble?
Well, I go through my first one. I think it was.
I mean, like a hacker, there was a hacker with this misunderstanding between the Afghan government and the office. We could not find that the hacker was a problem.
Where's the hacker?
We want the hacker. We know now the hacker and we have to fit it. For the next
Complete misunderstanding.
I think
It was a complete misunderstanding by the Bush administration as to what this country was, where they were. There wasn't any sense in the US administration of 2001 that this was going to be any different from, look, it was the same in Iraq. In fact, if anything, it was worse. The lack of willingness to accept that this is a sophisticated country, but it's not one that we understand. And as in Secretary Rumsfeld's unfortunate phrase, when a huge amount of looting and criminality emerged, stuff happens. And I think that in Afghanistan, there was the stuff that happened was the re-emergence of people who the United States backed in the late 80s and early 90s, but forgot to become, use the word warlords, had fought among themselves, and many of whom had become pretty corrupt during those years. And I think that was the hiccup, if you like, from the very beginning. And at the same time, funding too many of the wrong people and not supporting the right kind of security. Bill has another hiccup.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, go back to the very beginning. Did we build the right military for Afghanistan? Did we build the right type of government? And why did the Afghans agree to this, right? What did people say? I hear the argument, the U.S. foisted this on the Afghans, but the Afghans had to accept it as well. I think those were two critical problems. Was the government too centralized?
Let me tell you a story.
Yeah, sure.
General Karimi, who ultimately became the chief of general staff, was called back by, because he'd been a staff officer previously. He'd been a staff officer in the Russian administration, he'd been a staff officer in the Mujahideen administration. The Taliban in '96 called him in and he said he can't manage this because too many of his friends were dying, so he disappeared. He came back in 2001. Karzai put him in the Ministry of Defense when there were just about 10 Afghans in the Ministry of Defense when Karimi was there. And he said, we need to form the Afghan army, in terms of a core level. We need to, work out exactly how it is that we're going to do this. And two American advisors came in, and he told me the story. And they came in and they said, what we need to do is to build the army from the bottom. We need to build a platoon, and they set up out in the east of Kabul, a big military training ground. They set up a training camp over the winter, and they started to train soldiers, in these small units. And Karimi said, we need structures, we need logistics, we need funding. And the Americans said, no, let's do it from the bottom. So there was a functioning civil service. I mean, that's just the military. There was a functioning civil service right across the Afghan system. And those civil servants came back to work. They shaved off the beards that had had to grow during the Taliban years. They took off their shower camis, they got their suits from under the bed, when they'd been, hiding for the last 5 years, came into work, and the Americans said, we don't need you. We're gonna start from, this other place. So rather than working with what was there and the individuals who were there, who were really good. I mean, Karimi was, trained by, he'd been to Sandhurst in the UK, he'd done back in the 1960s. He had been to Ranger training in the US in the early 1970s, before the Russian war. And he was a really competent soldier. There were lots of really competent civil servants whose ideas were abandoned by the Americans who first came into the country. So I think, from the very beginning, I think there was the hiccup. The first hiccup was an American-inspired hiccup. And the Afghan hiccup was the re-emergence of, let's call it, warlords.
Can I just write
This-
Bill didn't finish his statement.
Did you finish?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Sorry.
No, you didn't.
I'll just take a couple of minutes to try and answer the second part of your question. Okay, I'll just take 30 seconds. In one sentence, we need a generational change in Afghan politics, and we need to institutionalize politics. From individual politics of, worshiping, these words like idols, and we need this generation of politicians to change. We need fresh blood. We need fresh faces to come forward and take the lead.
But thanks to Hamdad said, I think he opened the opportunity for the young generation with this building. We are tired of the cards. So it is not possible to change. Okay, we will finish this session with three takeaways. Then we took the wrong lesson. Unfortunately, we didn't listen. Bill, Al-Qaeda is stronger than we start fighting it. And Hamad said, we didn't lose the war. We lose the political game. Yeah. Thank you very much. And I will give the stage to.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I will now have a 10-minute short break, and we'll be back by 5:10.